Palestine!
Free! Free Palestine!
Free, free, free Palestine!
Free, free, free Palestine! Divest! We will not stop, we will not rest!
Disclose! Divest! We will not stop, we will not rest!
Disclose! Divest! We will not stop, we will not rest!
You can't hide!
You can't hide!
We charge you with genocide!
We charge you with genocide!
Free! Free Palestine!
Free Palestine!
Free, free, free Palestine!
Free, free, free Palestine!
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. My name is Toss. I'm a junior specialist here at UCSF. We are gathered here today not out of despair, not out of helplessness, but out of anger, out of righteous fury at the brutal, murderous rampage that the Zionist regime has unleashed upon our people in Palestine. Today marks 1 year of this horrific genocide, and we are now watching Israel's attempts at expansion. The last year has shown us that the so-called civilized world, what it truly is. Silent in the face of genocide, complicit in murder, and drenched in our blood. Lebanon is burning, Gaza is being obliterated, and the West Bank is under siege. The official death toll in Palestine is over 42,000 people, 70% being women and children, with 902 entire families wiped off the Gaza civil registry as a result. Over 100,000 injured. And all of these numbers are believed to be a vast undercount. The IPC index that measures global food security revealed that entire population, over 2 million people in Gaza, faces famine risk. There is no university left in Gaza and no fully functioning hospital. And in an update published last Monday, the World Health Organization reported that 11 healthcare workers have been killed and 10 injured between September 17th and the 28th in Lebanon. Some 37 health centers have been forced to close due to the fighting. Out of 317 total, and 3 hospitals treating patients have been evacuated, murdering over 2,000 of our brothers and sisters in just these last 2 weeks in Lebanon. In Gaza, over 2,000 people have been slaughtered in the last month alone. 2,000 mothers, fathers, children, the young, the old. While in the West Bank, hundreds have been gunned down or disappeared without mercy. Our hospitals have become graves. Over 1,000 of our healthcare workers killed. Medical facilities reduced to rubble over the year. This is not welfare. This is extermination. It's a deliberate and cowardly war on the right of Palestinian people to exist. The Zionists are not only targeting our civilians, they are hunting down the people who save lives. They think that by kidnapping our doctors, by bombing our clinics, they can break our will to fight. They want us to believe that there is no hope. But let me tell you something. Their bombs can destroy our homes, but they will never destroy our spirit. We honor our martyrs, and we honor them not with silence, not with fear, but with action, because we refuse to be complicit in genocide. What they don't understand is that our movement is not a handful of individuals. It is millions of people united by the unbreakable will to live free. The people of Palestine are sunflowers. Every time they try to uproot them, they spread, they grow, they multiply. They cannot stop us all because the truth is on our side and liberation is inevitable. But what stands in our way? What holds back our people's freedom. It is not just the Israeli war machine. It's the American empire and the complicit institutions like UCSF that support it. Biden, Harris, the entire U.S. establishment, they have blood on their hands. They pretend to call for a ceasefire while sending $9 billion in stolen taxpayer money to fund more bombs, drones, and more death. Shame. They tell us they can't afford to forgive our student loans. They can't afford free education or universal health care. But they found $9 billion for Israel. Neighborhoods in the southeastern U.S. have been flooded for the past week because of a hurricane fed by climate change. And the government says the Federal Emergency Management Agency doesn't have enough funding for disaster relief. But they found $9 billion for genocide. This money could instead be used to increase federal aid to public schools by 40%, to extend Medicaid to another 2 million people in our country, more than double funding for substance abuse and mental health crises, and increase our funding for citizenship and immigration services by almost 4 times. Every time they talk about Israel's right to self-defense, remember, they are defending the indefensible. They are defending the murder of children, the bombing of hospitals, the obliteration of entire neighborhoods. Kamala Harris says her support for Israel is unshakable. Well, so is our rage. So is our commitment to fight back. And so is our unbreakable solidarity with our people in Palestine and Lebanon. They talk about collateral damage, but what they mean is the slaughter of innocents. After the devastating airstrike in The Hague this weekend, killing hundreds of men, women, and children, the Biden-Harris administration called it a measure of justice. Justice. What does this government that caters to the rich and arms manufacturers while killing the innocent know about justice? This is the same government that executes black men like Marcellus Williams without hesitation. That has built its empire on the backs of the oppressed and now wants to tell us what is just? This is a government that celebrates our deaths, that thinks our suffering can be excused with empty words. And this system will not change by itself. It won't change because we ask politely. It will only change when we make a change, when we demand it, when we collectively take action, because the people are the lifeblood of this struggle. Do not forget, friends, our struggle is ongoing. As Fred Hampton said, you can jail a revolutionary, but you can't jail the revolution. You can murder a liberator, but you can't murder liberation. We are the ones who will carry on this struggle here in the heart of the empire. And what can we do, you may ask? We must organize. Join an organization here. Organize with your groups and your unions. Build with the people next to you. We must be the ones who ensure that the struggle lives on, that our brothers and sisters in Lebanon and Palestine know they are not alone. We must pressure this government, put an immediate arms embargo on Israel, fight for the freedom of all Palestinian prisoners and people, for an end to the occupation, for the dismantling of the siege on Gaza, and for the liberation of Palestine and Lebanon. We must demand an end to an Israeli impunity. We must make it so that the cost of Israel's terror becomes too high for the American empire to bear. They want us to feel powerless. They want us to believe that nothing we do here matters, but it does. Every protest, march, every petition, every voice raised on this campus against their violence matters. It makes them afraid because they know that when the people unite, They can't win. We must be relentless. And one day, comrades, we will take to these streets again. And not in anger, not in grief, but in celebration. To celebrate the end of occupation, the return of our lands, and the freedom of our people. We healthcare workers, students, professionals, community workers, we are part of the struggle toward justice, and we will win. From Beirut to Jenin, victory to the resistance, and from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Thank you all for showing up today for Gaza, for Lebanon, for Palestine. We will now name and grieve healthcare worker martyrs, some of whose names you see on these tombstones. These are just a handful of the hundreds of thousands killed in Gaza, and does not even begin to include martyrs in Lebanon, the West Bank, and beyond. Adnan Al-Bush, head of the orthopedics department at Al-Shifa Medical Complex. Al-Bush was killed while imprisoned at the Ofer prison on April 19, 2024. He was subjected to severe torture, and his body remains held by Israel. Midhat Mahmoud Khamis Saidam, professor of plastic surgery and one of the most prominent surgeons in Gaza. He co-established the burns unit in Shifa Hospital. His house was targeted upon his return to visit his family after 7 consecutive days of working in a Shifa hospital. Dr. Midhat was martyred alongside his entire family in their house. Muhammad Atif Muhammad Dabbour, medical school dean and pathologist at Al-Shifa Medical Complex. He was martyred alongside his son and father after his car was targeted as they fled to the south during the safe period that Israeli occupation forces had announced in their leaflets. Sireen Muhammad Yusuf Al-Attar, OBGYN, professor at the Islamic University and Al-Azhar University. She was martyred alongside her daughter and other members of her family as a result of an airstrike targeting her in the Gaza Strip. Ahmed Yusuf Hassan al-Mafadlik, lecturer, who then joined Anawal Primary Care Centers in Nusayrat camp in Gaza. She was martyred alongside her sisters, Hana and Malak, and her niece, Julia, as a result of an airstrike on their home in Nusayrat camp in the middle of the Gaza Strip. Da'a Abdel Nasser Muhammad Awad worked in the emergency department of Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital. After returning home following several continuous days of work at Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital, she was martyred the same day alongside her entire family as a result of a strike on their home in Deir al-Balah. Basil Yusuf Mahdi, head of the OBGYN department at Al-Shifa Medical Complex. Dr. Basil Mahdi was martyred as a result of a strike on the maternity hospital in Gaza City, to which they had fled with their families. Both doctors worked in the hospital from the beginning of the genocide until the day they were martyred. Those who were besieged in the hospital pled to be evacuated for several days before they were killed. Isra Mustafa Al-Ash'ar, second-year resident doctor in anesthesiology and intensive care at the Indonesian hospital. Occupation forces bombed her home as she returned home. She was martyred alongside 18 members of her family. Rafat Hassan Abdurrahman Labad, head of the internal medicine department in Al-Shifa Medical Complex and a university lecturer at the medical school. He was martyred alongside members of his family, his 3 daughters, his brother, and his sister-in-law as a result of an airstrike targeting his home in Gaza City after refusing to be displaced and continuing to work at Al-Shifa Hospital until he was killed.
Ziad Fathi Khalil al-Tattari, specialist in pediatrics and neonatology in Beit Hannoun Hospital, then with Doctors Without Borders in Al-Awda Hospital. Dr. Ziad was martyred alongside Dr. Mahmoud Abu Nujayla and Dr. Ahmed Al-Sahad as a result of a direct strike on the 3rd and 4th floors of Al-Awda Hospital, where they were working as part of a Doctors Without Borders team. Mu'in Ziad Rabbah Al-Sharafa worked as an anesthesiology specialist at Al-Quds Hospital during the genocide. He was martyred alongside his family as a result of occupation forces targeting their home. Muhammad Yahya Ahmed Sulaiman Adwan. Dr. Muhammad suffered from a chronic heart disease, but was forced to evacuate on foot towards the south. He was martyred as a result of a sniper bullet to his head by an occupation soldier. His children carried his body on foot alongside the painful path for over 20 kilometers to the south of the strip. Hani Adnan Al-Jaffarawi, head of the emergency department and the Ministry of Health in Gaza. Hani Al-Jaffarawi was martyred as a result of an airstrike targeting a Darraj clinic in Gaza City in the northern Gaza Strip while he was working. Ahmed Saleh Rashid Al-Dalloua. The martyr, Professor Dr. Ahmed, worked as a university professor in clinical pharmacology at Rabat National University. He was martyred along with 43 members of his family due to a direct attack on their home in Gaza City. Dua Jaddallah Musa Jaddallah. Dua Jaddallah was murdered alongside her entire family in a strike on their home in Sheikh Radwan neighborhood.
Reem Abu Labada, physical therapist with Doctors Without Borders since 2018. She and all her family members were martyred in an airstrike on their home in Khan Yunis, southern Gaza Strip. Arda Al-Hro, physiotherapist. Arda was a specialist physiotherapist and was martyred in an airstrike targeting Jabalia camp where he and his family were steadfast. He was filling up water for the camp residents when the strike happened. Fadi Jihad al-Wadi'a. He worked as a physiotherapist for Doctors Without Borders since 2018. He was martyred on his way to work at the Doctors Without Borders clinic in the center of Gaza Strip as a result of his bicycle being directly targeted by an airstrike. Ramaz Ubaid Musallim al-Najjar, director of Khuzaa Governmental Clinic. Dr. Ramaz and several members of his family were martyred as occupation vehicles invaded the Ramida neighborhood in Bani Suhaila. Jumana Farid Arafa, pharmacist, was killed with her twins 4 days after she gave birth to them. Usama Muhammad Atiyah Tayah, first responder and volunteer with the Palestinian Red Crescent during the genocide. As they took a rest from saving people's lives as a part of their work with the Red Crescent, Usama was killed and his colleague Muhammad Abu Rukba was injured in a strike on Fallujah at dawn on Monday, December 4th. Adham al-Ghul, first responder. First responder Adham al-Ghul was martyred as a result of an occupation airstrike on Nusayrat's camp in the middle of the Gaza Strip while conducting his humanitarian work. Safa Ahmed Ismail worked as a head of pharmacy in the Palestinian Red Crescent Society's Al-Quds Hospital. She was martyred alongside her daughter Rahaf and her son-in-law in a strike on their home in Gaza City. Fuad Abu Kamash, first responder and volunteer. Fuad was a photojournalist and a volunteer with the Red Crescent Society. He was martyred in a strike as well. Suhail Hassouna worked as an officer in the Palestine Red Crescent Society in the Gaza Strip. He was martyred alongside his comrades while conducting their humanitarian work in an occupation airstrike on Palestine Red Crescent Society vehicle in Tel al-Sultan neighborhood in Rafah City. Usama Samih Udah Abu Sofiya, he was a medical student. Martyr Usama Samah Udah Abu Sofiya was 22 years old. from North Gaza and was martyred on the Jabaliya camp, North Gaza, as a result of an Israeli military strike. Amal Subhi Abdullah Hijazi, also a medical student. Amal was martyred along with her family following the targeting of their home in Rafah in southern Gaza. Noor al-Huda Abdullah Mustafa al-Shaqqar was a faculty of dentistry at Palestine University. Dr. Noor al-Shaqqar was martyred alongside her family members in an attack on their home in the northern Gaza Strip. Duha Hassan Daghmaj, a medical student. She and 109 of her family members were killed in one strike. Muhammad Abdul Fattah Abul Jidyan was also a student, martyred in the bombing of a house that was sheltering dozens of family members in Jabalia in northern Gaza. Hussam Anwar Qosh was a nurse, martyred along with his brother, engineer Ayman Qosh, as a result of their house being directly targeted and collapsing on top of its residents. Wajih Shahada was a nurse, martyred alongside his family members as a result of the targeting of his family home in the beach camp west of Gaza City. Tasneem Hamdan was a nurse, martyred with her husband, Firas al-Sheikh, her infant son, her mother, and her sister in the Jabalia camp massacre north of the Gaza Strip. Ala Na al-Awni al-Shawa. Ala worked as a volunteer nurse with Doctors Without Borders at Educaiton Medical Complex during the genocide and was martyred in a strike on 2 vehicles after an unsuccessful attempt to evacuate civilians south of Gaza. Nayat Abu Atawi was a nurse clinical instructor, was martyred when occupation forces targeted an aid distribution center in Nusayrat camp. Amin al-Bahtiti was a dentist lecturer at Al-Azhar University. Dr. Amin al-Bahtiti was martyred in an Israeli strike as he searched for food for his family. Suleiman Jamal Suleiman Tarazi, an orthodontic surgeon, was martyred in a strike on the Orthodox Church of St. Porphyrius, which hosted internally displaced people. His wife and youngest son, Jad, were injured in the attack. Muhammad Abu Rujaila, volunteer dentist in Nasser Medical Complex, was martyred in Beni Suhaila as he went to his clinic to fetch some medical supplies. His body was found 5 days after he was killed. May our martyrs rest in power and guide us and center us on our path to liberation.
My name is Zina. I'm a student here at UCSF. I'm Palestinian, and I work to evacuate children with severe illnesses out of Gaza. There's a video I have seared into my mind that I watched when I was 5 years old. A man sitting on the ground with his young son in his lap, only 2 years old, huddled, protecting his son from the bullets that Israeli soldiers were shooting at them. I remember, just at the age of 5, praying for them to stop. I watched the son bleed into his father's lap and die. Last year, I saw a video of the same man holding his 2 dead brothers in his arms, both killed by Israeli bombing. A few months ago, I saw a video of the same man holding his other dead son, killed in 2024 by Israeli military. That is the life of one Palestinian under Israel's brutal colonization and occupation in Palestine. Israel, one of the most powerful militaries in the world, is younger than our grandparents. Built 75 years ago, on top of what was once Palestine, on top of blood-massacred Palestinians, on top of the footsteps of my pregnant grandma fleeing for her life to Syria. She would tell me how she buried cash in the dirt under her home, thinking she would return just after 3 weeks. She watched her family members, her friends, be killed by US and British-funded militias, now known as the Israeli military. In one day, those militias killed 15,000 Palestinians, forced 800,000 to flee, and burned 500 Palestinian villages to the ground, including my own, Jaffa, Palestine, now known as Tel Aviv, Israel. I never thought I would live to see something as horrific as what she saw that day. But for every day of 1 full year, I've had to watch a live stream of a genocide of my people. I've had to watch families that look like me, that speak my language, that live on the land that I was supposed to grow up on, burn alive on Instagram. And then watch my closest friends, my colleagues, my classmates be completely silent. And that broke me. The Lancet Journal recently published the updated death toll of Palestinians in the past year. 180,000. 180,000 Palestinians murdered in 1 year. 180,000 people murdered in a population less than Chicago. My friends in Gaza tell me of the misery of the constant sound of Israeli shooter drones. But they say that the real terror comes when the killer drones stop and there is silence. A midwife here at San Francisco General Hospital, who was working in Gaza this past year, described how she would hear screaming mothers and babies at night. She was told by a Palestinian man not to go outside and try to help them. He told her those are not real. A common tactic of psychological warfare by the Israeli military. Shooter drones making sounds of crying mothers and babies to lure people out of their homes at night to help and shoot them on the spot. This past week, one of the patients I work with, who was 15, died from a treatable disease because Israel blocked and bombed treatments for her disease in Gaza. She would have lived. Her siblings were a perfect bone marrow transplant match. When we finally evacuated her out to get treatment, Israel blocked her siblings from leaving, and she died in Egypt. After the girl's death, her mother, trapped in Egypt, separated from the rest of her children, screamed to us on the phone that she didn't want to live without her daughter. That was this week. My colleagues worked so hard in the past 5 years to finally build up pediatric hospitals in Gaza so that patients like her could live, despite Israeli siege and decades of bombing. They were doing a good job. And then in November, Israel flattened it and all the children inside in seconds. They've killed every pathologist. We have no way to diagnose children in Gaza anymore. This past week, my colleague, an incredible pediatrician at only the age 22, was killed in the pediatric hospital. That was this week. Last night, Israeli military launched a military attack on the homemade pediatric center in North Gaza with 140 injured and sick children in it, the last functioning one in North Gaza. Our pediatrician told us how he and all the kids and families had seconds to get up and run and were dispersed all over again. That was this week. This week, when Israel began bombing Lebanon, they killed the dad of one of my closest friends from Stanford, Nadine Jawad. He was here just a couple months ago for her graduation from Stanford Medical School. He was killed in the hospital while volunteering to give out food and mattresses, while Nadine was on the phone with him. In his last moments, as Israeli missiles fell around him in the hospital, he said to Nadine on the phone, "Do not be scared, because I am doing what I love, helping people in the land I love the most. Remember your responsibility to the poor, Habibti." Then she heard his body hit the floor from the bomb impact. That was my past week. This is just 1 week of my life this past year. Israel's attack on the healthcare system in Palestine has not only crossed the boundaries of countless war crimes, but has been unequivocally unacceptable and unbearable to watch. I do not want to normalize this life for myself, or for my friends like Nadine, who deserve to have her dad at her residency graduation. That is what the life, even the ones in the diaspora here at UCSF, of Palestinians look like, with ongoing Israeli apartheid, violent settler colonialism, occupation, and genocide. And yet, here UCSF is, firing employees that speak out about Palestine, canceling events and academic discussions of Palestine, and caring more about the Zionist lobbies that fund them than the safety of their own students and the principles that they pretend to uphold.
Shame! Shame! Shame!
We demand that the University of California divest all university investment funds from companies and assets that are complicit in the Israeli occupation of Palestine and the systematic oppression of Palestinian people. We demand that University of California immediately and permanently end all formal connections, programs, and initiatives with Israeli institutions and create initiatives to support and engage with Palestinian academia. We demand that the University of California enact policies in constellation with Palestinian, Arab, and pro-Palestinian students, staff, and faculty to specifically protect the safety, civil liberties, and academic freedoms of these groups. And we demand the University of California publicly disclose all sponsors of UC grants and contracts, including the sponsors that support the Israeli occupation of Palestine, which the UC system has recently removed from being available. From you, my fellow students, I ask you to be messengers, to learn about Palestine, to have conversations and share what you learn with friends and family, to post on social media and write about Palestine and make art about Palestine and sing about Palestine, to engage in spreading discussions for a cause that has been forcibly silenced by wealthy lobbyists and Western media for 3 generations of my family. It is hard enough to suffer through genocide. Do not leave your Palestinian friends alone to be the ones providing education and taking action for Palestine. Do not be fooled. A ceasefire will never happen. It is up to us. Israel is nothing without the U.S. And the only way we can put an end to the massacres, the billions of funding going to Israeli weapons with our tax dollars, is for us to put pressure on the U.S. government. And that starts with institutions like University of California, San Francisco. We must put pressure on wealthy companies by boycotting corporations that fund Israel and take action at institutions like UCSF. And remember that we are not outnumbered. We are out-organized. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free.
While we mourn our martyrs and all the innocent lives that we have lost, we are also fighting so hard for those who are still living and want to highlight and bear witness to the atrocities healthcare workers and others are undergoing in Gaza right now. Dr. Fadil Naeem is an orthopedic surgeon in Palestine in the Gaza Strip. And this is what he said. The situation in northern Gaza's hospitals that are still operational is dire, since there is not enough room for the increasing number of injured and sick patients. In order to offer the required care, we are compelled to ask the families to supply a mattress for the injured individual to lie on. We are also forced to discharge many of the injured people prematurely before they complete their treatment, so that we can make space for new patients whom we will receive at any moment. Educaiton Lulu is a fifth-year medical student in the besieged northern Gaza. And he said, when you hear news reports about the numbers of injuries from Gaza, remember, behind those numbers are real lives, real suffering, stories that need to be heard. When you hear the word injuries, know that these injuries are not just scrapes and bruises, but instead life-changing and damaging injuries, like multiple limb amputations. Most of these patients we are seeing here are subjected to the most brutal amputations with no painkillers but anesthesia because of Israel. Normally these amputations would be preventable, but because of the blockade, and the siege of Gaza, there's no other choice. What we need from you is to fight an increase in humanitarian aid relief, complete ceasefire, and arms embargo. What we need is a free and liberated Palestine. A trauma surgeon also recounted from his work there. We had children that were hit with such high-velocity bullet wounds, exactly where I would put my stethoscope. And then they were shot perfectly in their temple, and their brains were missing. No child gets shot twice by mistake. And from a letter from American health workers in Gaza, we all observed emergency departments overwhelmed by patients seeking treatment for chronic medical conditions, such as renal failure, hypertension, and diabetes. Aside from trauma patients, most ICU beds were occupied with patients with type 1 diabetes who no longer had access to insulin. The lack of medication availability, the widespread loss of electricity and refrigeration, and inconsistent access to food made managing this disease virtually impossible in Gaza.
The following account is from surgeon Dr. Hassan Abu Sita. We have run out of burns dressings. We have more than 70 wounded with burns covering more than 40% of their body surface. 80% are children. The hospitals, because of the siege, are so short of supplies that we had to clean a teenage girl with 70% surface burns with regular soap because the hospital was out of antiseptic. Vinegar from the corner shop was used to treat bacterial wound infections. It has come to that. The next account is from plastic surgeon Dr. Victoria Rose, who volunteered at the European Hospital in March and April and Nasser Hospital in August. She said that the main difference between the first and second visit was that there was a growing number of deaths coming in and a smaller number of charities and doctors working. She said, I saw one of the emergency medical teams while I was there in August, and became acutely aware of the lack of specialist doctors. I was the only plastic surgeon in Gaza at that period, and I was the first plastic surgeon to enter Gaza since May. We had very, very basic supplies. I was using kitchen vinegar to put on wounds. The amount of aid that was getting to hospitals was a fraction of what we had in March. Every time I speak at a rally or a vigil, I struggle to find the words. How do we honor our martyrs when we cannot even bring an end to their killing for 366 days? I'm speaking to you today as a Palestinian student with family in Gaza. And like many of us here, I'm speaking to you with a heavy heart. Since Israel's assault on Gaza began last year, over 100 members of my family have been killed. Most of them were bombed as they slept, buried under the rubble of their homes, or in designated safe zones where they were told to evacuate to. It is a horrifying, devastating reality that I struggle to process every single day. There are no words that capture this magnitude of loss, nor should there be. Tragically, this experience is not uncommon in Gaza. There is not a single family that has not been affected by Israel's genocidal bombing campaign. There is not a single family that has not lost people. It has been over 1 year of genocide in Gaza, 1 year of murdering children, 1 year of starving pregnant mothers, 1 year of killing fathers seeking aid for their families, 1 year of targeted assassinations of medical personnel, journalists, academics, and artists. 1 year of systematic destruction of every aspect of Palestinian life in Gaza. And it has been 1 year of complicity from this university. Let us be clear. The world's silence following Israel's bombing of Al-Ahli Baptist Hospital in October of last year gave Israel the green light to destroy Gaza's entire healthcare sector. In the last year, we have seen hospital raids where hundreds of bodies have been uncovered. Men, women, and children found bulldozed and crushed into the earth. Many still bound with the handcuffs they were wearing when they were executed. For over 1 year, Israel has continued to attack Palestinian hospitals, schools, and refugee camps, fueled and emboldened by the world's silence. But now is not a time for helplessness or despair. Now is the time to be moved to action. Now is the time to honor the oath we made as healthcare workers. History is watching, and it will not reflect kindly on those who are complicit in genocide. History will not reflect kindly on those who provide financial and diplomatic cover for genocide. It is our duty to continue to show up for Palestine and for Lebanon, not only until the daily massacres end, but until the siege is lifted, the occupation is ended, the system of apartheid is dismantled, the displaced return to their homes, Gaza is rebuilt, and Palestine is free. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are gathered here today as healthcare workers, students, researchers, and community members of conscience to mourn, rage, and rise against the massacre of healers and the intentional decimation of Gaza's healthcare infrastructure. We are also here today as members of the UCSF community to call our institution to account for its silence and complicity in the ongoing genocide and occupation. This university, which takes our tuition dollars, pays our wages, and claims to have a mission of advancing health worldwide, the university and its leaders have blood on their hands. Based on numbers from last year, UCSF has a total endowment of over $6 billion. This is the money used to fund student scholarships, faculty and staff jobs, research and innovation, all for the mission of advancing health worldwide. But for half of that $6 billion endowment, the half managed by the UCSF Foundation, we don't know where it's invested. The UCSF Foundation doesn't think it needs to be accountable to our community by transparently disclosing what they do with that money. But we do know where the other half is going. The other half of UCSF's endowment is managed by the UC Regents, and we know that they've invested in companies like BlackRock, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, companies that make weapons and equipment for the Zionist occupation and profit off of genocide. This endowment is supposed to help fund UCSF's mission of education, research, and clinical care. So why is it being invested in genocide profiteers who are arming an occupation that is mercilessly destroying hospitals, schools, universities, and entire family lineages? How can the leaders of this institution charge us to honor our sacred oath, first do no harm, when they are actively funneling money into the genocidal war machine? For the past year, we healthcare workers and UCSF community members of conscience have been calling on this institution to condemn genocide and medical apartheid, to divest from the Zionist occupation, and to support medical aid to Gaza. Have they done any of these things yet? No. Those in power at UCSF have decided that they are more interested in policing their own community members than taking a stand for human rights and justice. UCSF has continuously refused even to put out a statement in opposition to genocide, let alone commit to divestment or medical relief, even as the Zionist regime has turned hospitals and schools into rubble. What have they done instead? They've sent us multiple vague and empty emails equating anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. They have threatened the jobs of faculty and staff members for speaking up in solidarity with the Palestinian people. They've called the cops on their own students for protesting genocide. They've changed their freedom of expression policies and are even trying to police masking on campus, despite being a major academic medical center during an ongoing viral pandemic. As despicable as it is, UCSF's continued silence and repression of the Palestinian liberation movement isn't so surprising when you look at who holds the purse strings. The Helen Diller Family Foundation is one of UCSF's biggest funders. They've given billions of dollars to UCSF. In fact, many of us see Helen Diller's name every day as we come and go from campus at the entrance of the hospital right across the street. Well, guess who else has benefited from the philanthropy of Helen Diller Foundation? Technion, an Israeli institution whose research develops weapons and other technology for the occupation. Canary Mission, an organization dedicated to doxing those who speak out against Zionism. Project Veritas, a conservative group that produces doctored videos under the guise of citizen journalism to spread disinformation and incite far-right violence. Turning Point USA, a nonprofit whose mission is to spread far-right ideology across college campuses and get more fascists elected to public office. On top of all of that, the Helen Diller Foundation has made numerous donations to Islamophobic hate groups here and abroad, and its leaders have actively campaigned against measures to keep housing affordable for working-class people here in the Bay. Is it any wonder that UCSF continues to police and silence us for rising against genocide when it is in the pocket of genocidaries? But we will not be silenced. Just as the people of Palestine and Lebanon remain steadfast in their struggle to resist, rebuild, and thrive, so must we remain steadfast in solidarity and action. We will continue to demand transparency from UCSF and the University of California system about their funding and investments. We will continue to pressure our institutions to divest from the companies that are arming and profiting off of genocide. We will continue to demand that our university stand up for the safety and rights of its Palestinian, Arab, Muslim, and pro-Palestinian students, staff, and faculty. And we will continue to fight until Palestine is free. Thank you.
Thank you all to everyone for coming out today, and for our student speakers, and for all the organizers who made today happen.